Welcome to It's a Serenus Life podcast, Learning Lessons, Episode 3. This is my physical truth. I thought I understood myself growing up, but there was something inside me that was screaming for truth. I longed to be understood about things that I would experience physically, emotionally, mentally. I had to grow up finding this all out for myself. I couldn't keep intimate relationships. I was angry when I couldn't explain things appropriately, and I always wanted to know why it was so hard for me to find out why I felt the way I felt. Growing up, I felt my whole life was a non-stop moving train. Having kids now, I understand children long for constant movement, but I am also aware that children need downtime and stillness. Children and parents need to see if anything arises that they need to be concerned about, with all that goes on in a child's development. Growing up, I just remember always moving, never slowing down to really understand what was really going on around us all. Why could I feel I had so much going on around me, yet be such a sad child inside, while staying positive to everything? Because that's how I felt I was raised to be. I was an undiagnosed ADHD female child growing up with a lot of inner child wounds that I had no idea I had. I didn't know how to handle my wounds, how to understand them, and learn to grow in life with these wounds. I was a child who grew up with unhealthy emotional responses, with no one helping me to understand why my body and my emotions were not lining up. Life was not as pretty as I was meant to show. I began growing up seeing all that's around me. Seeing life is really hard. Life has pain and sadness, and I felt that pain. I could feel others' sadness. I could sense things that were just not explainable. I will say, in highly sensitive environments, I would feel I needed to fix or lessen the emotional fires around me all the time, almost like it was my job to contain or put out fires. I literally had so much anxiety and stress growing up, and it started as a child. I was an adult who couldn't explain my own emotions, just that I didn't feel right in certain situations. I would eventually understand maybe I was a superhero after all. A superhero that can detect lies and hidden truths that I know are tearing you apart inside. A superhero detective sniffing out the BS and finding the missing puzzle pieces to why some of us can't find happiness or joy in our lives. Well, maybe that's because we weren't ever allowed to talk about the uncomfortable things. Talking bad about anyone brought shame to the family, lies that made others feel better with. Well, what about those of us who can't handle the made-up lies? What if we can't be okay with the response? I was a little girl growing up in a world where conversations didn't happen. Children were seen, not heard. And just to give you an example, a child's brain development in age is from birth to age 6, when the brain development is peaking. Behaviors are learned, and children are introduced to school. So when you realize that the person that was improperly touching you, a child himself was fondling and having me do things a young girl should not know about, and he shouldn't have known about them either, I remember feeling extremely uncomfortable. When I told an adult because my body was not okay, my feelings were saying this is not okay, but an adult who should have protected me or removed me from the environment permanently responds with, "Oh, honey, that's just what boys do when they are curious sometimes." I will say, now at age 45, around May 2025, my body and mind were so overwhelmed, and I felt my truth. It all came out with the biggest cry. To think something that I had pushed down to the depths of the sea was rising to the surface, and something that happened decades ago followed me with every interaction, every intimate relationship, and would later find out it came between every single relationship I had. I couldn't figure out why my heart, body, and mind were not lining up. I remember feeling anxious all the time. I was always fighting to be heard. As I encountered this unfortunate truth, it was so important that I understood it was not my doing. It was not my fault. I do not have to feel ashamed. I have every right to be upset, and I have every right to feel every single feeling. I have a daughter now, and if she ever said what I said as a young girl, that situation would have been handled and taken care of immediately. At times now, I just stop and say, "Damn it! I was sexually abused. I wasn't saved when I should have been. I was taught a false reality, and I lived in that false reality until something traumatic happened. Something big needed to shake up my reality and make me go through all the crap that I was holding back. I was determined to be the best version of myself." That traumatic event that happened to shake my world was when my best friend passed away, 2019. I couldn't save her, but I was able to be with her and beside her right up until the end. When she passed, I had to really educate myself on the 5 stages of grief. This would eventually lead to uncovering every childhood wound I would have ever experienced. I was never taught how to handle the hard truths, the hard realities of life. This is not God's fault. It's the fault of the enemy that was in the abuser's mind or to the abuser's abusee. These are taught and learned behaviors, not the truth of how life is. It's unhealed people destroying unhealed people. Where do we draw the line? Too many controlled environments, guided by emotionally unstable individuals that come with their own inner child wounds. It's not God. The more I asked about this, the more I got told I'm just too inquisitive and emotional, and almost everything I felt was always questioned, and I was too much or just too dramatic. I felt I was never quite getting or understanding the whole truth about things. Just what you wanted me to know, and what truths were easier for everyone else to feel comfortable with. The hard truths in life can make you look at yourself in the mirror and tear yourself apart. Being raised in church, I was a girl who was to love herself and love the life she has. Then why was I unable to see the reality others were placing around me? Why was I always moving but not living in my truth with real happiness? I do know I am a highly emotional, I was an innocent but performer child. I was a very expressive little girl who just wanted to feel safe, heard, and understood. But I couldn't explain the seriousness I was experiencing all around me. I couldn't believe how many adults were around me. They couldn't slow down to see what was really going on around them. I grew up in a world I didn't understand. I tried to stay out of the way, tried to find outlets like sitting in front of the TV, using my creative imagination, singing and creating my own safe reality space. I remember moving homes a couple of times until 4th grade. We finally found a home where we lived for the next 13 plus years. Thankfully, I was able to use my imagination, escaping to a world that I really did have control of. The household I grew up in was such a sensitive place to be a part of. My burdens were one of many burdens that everyone had in my household. I began to realize the way I explained things weren't understood, but always seemed to be reminded, you had everything. You got everything we never had. You're too emotional. Everything is always about you. I remember begging to be heard and understood, longing for validation. Having children of my own, I see how important emotional regulation and communication truly is. I just lived the way I thought I was supposed to live, by the guidance of my family and what people thought. But in all that I was guided to do, I could tell my emotions were off. I fell hard for those who I deeply loved. A simple no response came back with a giant why every time. My emotions were all over the place. I realized that my anger was from a place of not being heard rather than just the point I was trying to make. I longed to know the whys. It was important to me to learn why this or that happens or could happen. I told you I was inquisitive, but I was a child trying to connect my body's responses with my emotional responses. I wanted to know why my internal body responses were not lining up with the correct emotional response. Why is this coming up now at age 45? I remember being told how I could feel. So many times the innocence of my inner child was not being properly guided nor protected in situations that made me feel extremely unsafe, unheard. If those feelings arose, my body reacted, big emotions that I kept bottled up until I needed a release. Emotions coming out in so many unhealthy ways, but why? I was determined to understand. Why am I living with so much emotional and mental and physical weight? Lots of baggage that isn't even mine. I long to feel joy and love again. Thank you for listening to It's a Serenist Life podcast. Second part to this episode will be next. Thank you.